Welcome to MyLife Chassidus Applied, episode 517. A gemar simeteva, a good gebenched year, a blessed year, as we're coming from Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, literally yesterday, Yom Kippur, and entering into a new year, Tovshin Pei Hei. This program is in loving memory of Miriam Bas Eliyahu Altes, Aleh HaShalom, and in merit of Baruch ben Yomen ben Menucha Lana Altes, Yikosil ben Leah Rochel and Rochel Bas Liba Farkash, dedicated by Pinchas Todres ben Miriam and Sarah Bas Rochel Altes. Coming from Yom Kippur, of course, the holiest day of the year, the most powerful day, Achaz Bashana, that one unique, singular, exclusive day that brings us forgiveness, hope, a clean slate, new possibilities, the ability to overcome all the challenges and setbacks of the past and transform them into a far, far greater and brighter future. So a day like this is absolutely unique. It's a day where we literally have been forgiven and we have, like I said, a clean slate. The Medrash calls it Rishon L'Cheshbon Avonos. But the truth is, the Medrash also says that this is a time of the year, L'Kachtem L'Chem B'Yem HaRishon, that Yom Rishon L'Cheshbon Avonos is actually the first day of Sukkos, not the first day after Yom Kippur, because these 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkos we're busy doing mitzvahs. So this brings me to addressing the first, most important question right as we come from Yom Kippur. Chassidus applied to this time of year. What is the lesson from these days between Yom Kippur and Sukkos? So it's exactly that. You really have a situation where you're literally told that everything from the past has been wiped off the slate. You're starting a new year. And now you have 4 days where people are busy, as the Medrash says, with this one is Esek Belulav, this one Be'esek, this one Be'sukkah. So when you're busy with mitzvahs, you don't have time for other things. So it's literally days that are extremely pure days. Yom Kippur, of course, is the most powerful day of all. But we're coming now, I don't want to call it a shadow, I want to just call it basking in the glow of Yom Kippur. So that gives us complete new opportunities. You know, one of the greatest challenges in life, and I say it even on a psychological, secular, therapeutic level. And you see here how Torah informs everyone, that everybody can learn from this. One of the greatest challenges is we know nobody's perfect. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if that surprises anyone. Nobody's perfect. We've all had our mistakes, some advertent, some inadvertent, deliberate, not deliberate. We make our mistakes. We're human beings. Often the mistake can be a costly one. It could hurt you, could hurt others. So the question is there hope after loss? Is there rebuilding after destruction? Because if we give up hope, in many ways that's even worse than the original mistake. Because it means, okay, so things are now changed forever. A certain fatalism and resignation can settle in. And this is what happens to many people. Many people, especially as the years roll on, say, you know, the idealism I once had, I threw in the towel to some extent. I don't have the same passion and beliefs in the things I felt were so powerful. It's always sad to hear. One of the things that stood out from the Rebbe, just on a very balabatisha basic level, was this, that there was nothing impossible. There was never giving up. Age didn't make a difference. Health didn't make a difference. Obviously, you try to be as healthy as you can and be as strong as you can. But there was this forging ahead, because you have a focus, you have a mission. You're on a mission. There's a sense of urgency. And that dominates over everything. And how does that help? Because when you have a mindset of victory, that you always see ahead, you always see and believe in a brighter future, it gives you strength. It simply strengthens your immune system. So in the essence of all therapies, really the basis is based on Yom Kippur. That there's always hope, no matter what happened to you in your life. And people have been traumatized, and they've been, God forbid, molested, and people have been abused, and people have been hurt. Some of it may be exaggerated, some people are too much maybe immersed in it. Not that they want to be, but sometimes you have to also know how to transcend. I'm not saying ignore. I'm not saying minimize. But transcend means you can't be defined by that trauma. Why? Because your neshama is the most important thing. Yom Kippur is the day of soul. We go through all 5 levels of the soul. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chay, yechida. And neshama shenasata b'taherehi, the highest levels, that's ultimately who you really are. Everything else is superimposed. So knowing that changes the whole attitude. When a person has that confidence, as I've told many, many therapists and counselors and coaches, if you don't have that confidence, then what you're doing is basically putting a Band-Aid, basically a balm that just makes somebody feel a little better and deal with their symptoms. But you need to believe in their soul. You need to believe in the very core essence of good that they are. And no matter what happens in life, that's not their destiny. When you have that going for you, it opens up all the doors. So it's not just about trach gut wird sein gut, as some people dismiss, God forbid, as being some type of euphemism, nice line, make people feel good. No, your attitude shapes your reality. And it changes everything. The Jewish people would not be here today had they not had that. As the more they were afflicted, the more they thrived and they flourished. And throughout history, not that we want challenge, not that we want pain, not that we want suffering, but if it comes our way, it doesn't define us. It happened to us, but it doesn't define you. What defines you is your divine soul. Your tzelem elikim, tahirihi. Every morning you say, Neshama shenasata b'tahirihi. No matter what you did, that's what you say. Tahiri means pure. But as Chassidus explains, it's the level of Tehiri Allah, the level of Yechida, Chai Yechida, all the high levels. That's who you really are. And then Ato Barasa, then it comes down into the level of Barasa. Yitzarta, Yitzarta, Tanafachtabi, Vata Meshamre Bekibi. Yes, it needs protection. It needs to be watched over and cared over. Because in this world, it's a difficult world. Kol Hadrachim Becheska Sakana, all the paths are dangerous. But the Tahira always reigns supreme. That's who you really are. That's the essence. So when you say, that Neshama Tahira, that's what was returned to you. It's a critical lesson in life, in every situation. Imagine teaching our children, whatever will come your way, and God should bless you, should have the least amount of challenges. But so anything comes your way, know that you have in you resources. Even the beginning of Tanya, Mashbiyim Eseti Tzadik Valti Rasha. Mashbiyim, not just from the word an oath, a vow, a promise, but Mashbiyim from the word Masbiyim, like V'savota, Achalta V'savota, you're sated, you're fed, you're saturated, you're nourished with all types of strengths and resources to be a tzaddik and not be the opposite. So now as we come from Yom Kippur, we go into Sukkos, we're blessed. Here's mitzvahs. Do a lot of mitzvahs. Let the Yom Kippur spirit fill us up. And that's a word also, Chedesh Hashvi, also from the word V'savata. Masbi, like the Medrash says, Muzba Bakel, it's filled, saturated with all. The holidays of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, says Meitzuvah, Yom Kippur, the days before Sukkos, Shana Rabbah, Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah. So the word Shvi, the 7th month, from the first being Nisan, Tishrei, is filled. And that's what these days are about. Because now we have already Rosh Hashanah with behind us, and with us, and the 10 days of Tshuva and Yom Kippur, and the highest levels of Yom Kippur. So that leads us to the next question. Why is this day, after Yom Kippur, called God's Nomen, God's name? So someone writes, is this significant because we know a name is just an external reference to a characteristic? whereas a special day perhaps being called God's essence would be much more significant? Can we ask Rabbi Jacobson to please explain? So indeed, we know this from the Baal Shem Tov. It comes from earlier Sfarim and earlier places. The Baal Shem Tov Taka explains the different names of God. We have 7 names. We have the 70 names. Shiva Neshem She'enim Chokim. So generally speaking, each name, like the Medrash says, Lefi Maisi Ani Nikra. God is called. We know that God is Leslo. The Zohar says. It says about Anochi Leslo. He doesn't have a name. God is beyond names. A name is a description. A description is a definition. And we know Atzmus is higher than definitions. And yet, the Eibishter chose to manifest in definitions, and Lefi Maisi. So, Kael would be Chesed. Elikim is Din. Rachamim Teferes is Havaya. And the same with the other names. When you say God's Nomen, you're saying, like we're talking, like it says by Vayikra, it doesn't say the name, it says Vayikra al Moshe. So the Alter Rebbe asks, who's Vayikra who? Called Moshe. So he's talking about the level that's higher than shame, the Etzem. Being that we're coming from Yom Kippur, especially Yechidi Li'ardecha, that's higher than all expressions and definitions, going to the very core. So that's why the next day is called God's Nomen, Stam God's Nomen, God's name. Like what's made of the Etzem. Frierdiker Rebbe says that the 4 days between between Yom Kippur and Sukkah is also connected Yud Kei Vav Kei, the 4 letters Yud Kei Vav and Kei. But remember, Havaya is also Shema Etzem, but it still has the level that's called a Shem. It's a name. Eya sometimes higher, Anoichi even higher, or Anoichi is like the level of Eya, or Kaponim higher than Havaya. But God's Nomen symbolizes that doesn't have expression, doesn't have manifestation, doesn't have personality. You're touching the very core, which is, of course, the theme we're talking about here. That's what's radiating on this day, the day after Yom Kippur. It says about one of the Tanoim that he would bring a korban, Osham Tali, every day, except the day after Yom Kippur. Because day after Yom Kippur, everything is forgiven. Another question, what is the proper way to greet people during these days? Before Rosh Hashanah, the proper greeting was Ksiv Simeteva. Before Yom Kippur, it's Gmach Simeteva. But what are the proper New Year greetings between Yom Kippur and Sukkos? So I have not seen somewhere officially what is the official greeting. If I recall correctly, the Rebbe would say a good Geben Shtyar. I think he would say Gmach Simeteva even after Yom Kippur. Obviously, Motzei Yom Kippur, we say Good Yontif. But generally, a good Geben Shtyar fits. A good Tekfittel is primarily a Heshayna Rabbah, because that's when not only the books are sealed, that's when they're completely finalized, ready to send off. But these days, those expressions seem to be fine. Again, I can't say it with authoritative validation. They definitely are fitting. If somebody has more on this, please let me know, and I'll be happy to share. So with that asked, someone asked the question, how do our blessings and best wishes, what is the significance of New Year and holiday blessings? So the significance we'll talk about now in detail, but it's clearly an important thing to bench people. So how do our blessings and best wishes help? Another person writes it like this: how does wishing someone a happy new year change Hashem's will so that it manifests as actual positive revealed blessings for a good year for the recipient of the blessing? So first of all, on a very basic level, saying a bracha to someone, like we say thank you. So the same thing, a bracha, you're blessing someone. So even without any deeper explanation, it's already a positive thing. Saying something good to another person, it's like in the category of Avos Yisrael, loving another. But bracha also comes from the word hamshacha, bracha and hamshacha. When you say a bracha, you're drawing down energy. Hamavlich min hagefen, Chassidus brings the expression. It's like grafting, drawing down, like channeling down a blessing. So the fact is that when we bless each other, when you bless another person, you're drawing down that bracha that you're saying. Whether it's for a gmach simeteva, or a gmach simeteva, or a good geben shtyar. far as it manifesting and changing Hashem's will, so Chassidus talks about bracha and tefillah. The difference between bracha and tefillah is that bracha, it reveals that which is already stored for you. And the bracha makes sure that you receive it in a revealed way. Tefillah has the power of Yehi Rotzen to create actually a new will of Hashem. Even if it's not designated for you, you can create some new energy. By Birchas Kohanim, Chassidus explains, and the Rebbe cites it quite often, it's a combination of Ad Meheri Yoretz Dvari, both. A combination of it being a tefillah and a bracha. And it's indeed the bracha that we hear, that we say to our children before Kol Nidrei. The bracha that Rebbe would say to the Bochrim before Kol Nidrei, and then later years he also said it before Mincha. The bracha after Mincha, I should say. So that's a bracha. That bracha has both milas, which we'll talk about shortly more, because someone asked the question after that. Okay, that's regarding blessings in general. Can we bless others with a priestly blessing even if we are not kohanim? Are we still allowed, if we're not kohanim, to randomly bless our friends using the three phrases of Yevarecha Hashem v'Yishmerecha? If we can't use those three phrases, then what's the next best thing that we can say? So first of all, even though it's true the formal bracha of Birchas Kohanim is dafka to Kohanim. They say it Ba'ava, Yom Kippur, all the Yom Tevim, Eretz Yisrael every day. So what we see at Yom Kippur, every parent, Kohen or not, blesses their children with Yevarechecha. The Rebbe, who is a Yisrael, blessed his students, his children, and Eden B'chlal with Yevarecha Hashem Yishmerecha. The question is year-round whether you can use that bracha or not. Probably talks about it in Sfarim. I have not looked it up, to be very honest. Sometimes people use the bracha of Ephraim and Menashe for their children. But Yevarecha is definitely a blessing used. The Rebbe's father, when he writes to the Rebbe, I believe, uses that bracha as well. Explains it a bit. So my answer would be, it's a posuk in Torah, and you're allowed to use it. In the Rebbe's later years, I think it was Tov Nun Aleph. I think Nun Aleph in the bracha side of Yom Kippur, the Rebbe actually explained at length the bracha and the details of the bracha. So you can look it up with many different sources. Now, obviously, in Birchas Kohanim itself, there are levels, as the Rebbe explains there. There's the level of Kohanim, and then there's the Kohen Gadol. When he said Birchas Kohanim, the Rebbe adds, you have to say his bracha is even a higher level of Birchas Kohanim. But bottom line is, it's something that definitely can be said. And it's, as I said, there's a pasuk in Torah and a pasuk we say in davening, and therefore it's something definitely can be used as a blessing to others. Another person asked the question, though I am a simple person, can I bless others? So interesting, Ashgacha Pratis, I got a few questions that were not related initially or officially, but when you read them together, you see they come together. You'll soon see, we'll talk about a story that happened in Tofresh Memches with the Rebbe Rashab about Poshet Tzid, Anoshim Pshutim, but I'll talk about that later. But right now, I want to answer the question, though I'm a simple person, can I bless others? So we all know the answer to the Rebbe. Someone wrote to the Rebbe from one of the islands that he's a simple Jew from, forgot which island it was, and the Rebbe responded, there's no such thing as a simple Jew. Every Jew is a Ben Avram Yisrael v'Yaakov, Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah, and has tremendous keiches. The Baal Shem Tov says, every Yid is a Eretz Chayfetz. It's like a land filled with treasures. So there's no such thing as simple. So the question is how it manifests. So the answer is absolutely, and as such you could bless others. Someone writes, I mean, I'll read it even though it's a little self-deprecating for the person who's writing it. He writes, why do people laugh and scoff at me when I give New Year blessings? I say the customary Gmar Chesima Teva greeting, and I always finish by saying, may you always have good news to share. Is it appropriate to bless people with may you always have good news to share? Why do they mock this person? So he writes, I'm just a regular person. I'm nobody special. I'm just trying to emulate the Rebbe, who's very special, and whenever I went by on Sunday dollars and asked a quick question or asked for a blessing, he often replied to me in English and said, may God Almighty bless you with good news. So therefore I feel that wishing someone good news is a nice appropriate blessing. So I would like to also say May all the families of the hostages have good news that their loved ones have been safely returned, and may all Klal Yisrael have the best good news, which will be the full revelation of Moshiach in our physical world. Amen. Absolutely, and I commend you for that, and we should applaud you for that. You heard the bracha from the Rebbe, and absolutely, that's exactly what you learned, what we're supposed to hear and learn from the Rebbe, to bless people. So I don't know why people are scoffing, and to me that is just inappropriate. Fact is, every Jew is a chelik elikam mamish. You have the power to bless. V'avarchem v'verachecha. The Eibishter says, "Those that bless you shall be blessed." So you have all the strength, and you should continue to bless many Jews, and your blessings should be fulfilled. We say a birchas hedget. Al tehi kal beinecha fil birchas hedget. Even the bracha of a person so-called hedget, not a gavoya, not someone necessarily in a high level. Don't take it lightly. Every blessing matters, and every blessing is powerful. And in general, we are not here to judge and measure people, who's higher, who's lower, as we'll soon talk about some more. Okay. And absolutely appropriate, may you always have good news to share. B'suras tevis, as the Rebbe would say. Now, let's move, since we're talking about the days from Yom Kippur and Sukkos. We talked about brachas. Let's address post Yom Kippur. So there's quite a few questions that came in before Yom Kippur, which I'm going to have to leave either next year or after Moshiach comes. But there's some post Yom Kippur that I think are still appropriate and fitting into the context of what we're talking about. So I'm going to address some of those. If everyone was forgiven in Yom Kippur, why are some people being punished and suffering? Person writes, if everyone is automatically forgiven in Yom Kippur, then why are some people punished and have had bad things happen to them? How can that be possible if they were forgiven and written and sealed into the book of life on Yom Kippur? Okay, so look, we cannot make determinations when something happens to someone, why it happened and how it happened, whether it's a punishment, whether it's a judgment. We don't know God's mysterious ways. What we know is what we're told. This is the day where everyone is forgiven. The fact that some people, Rahman al something happens to them a day after Yom Kippur, or even on Yom Kippur, that's God's mysterious ways. It's not necessarily a punishment. And we definitely are not in position to make that statement. So our answer is everyone was forgiven, and we have to go with the approach, Tomim tiyim Hashem elekecha. Straightforward approach. God told us He forgave us. It's a new year, a blessed year. We wore white because we're confident that we'd prevail, that we'd be victorious. And we were. And we sang Napoleon's March at the end of Yom Kippur, which designates which celebrates the victory. And that's how we have to approach our lives. God's cheshbein is God's calculations, are God's things, and we have to always keep thinking positively, and that's all that matters. So I can't start answering you why some people this happened and some people that happened. That goes back to the big question, why bad things happen to good people. The mysteries of God, we don't ask why, we ask what are we going to do about it. And that's how we approach it. And remember again, going back to the original point, Neshama shenesata b'tahirihi. Yom Kippur was a celebration, was a testimony, declaring about the powerful neshama of every Yid, and the powerful power that Moshe prevailed over Hashem. Vayemen Hashem salachti kidvarecha. I've forgiven them, even though it was the worst possible crime. Yareg val yaver, idolatry, the golden calf. So we'll go with that power of Yom Kippur, and that's what leads us into the year, and that's how we should be thinking. Everything else is just a distraction that has no value at all. Okay, if you want to think about how you can be a better person, motivates you to take the Yom Kippur energy and make sure it lasts and sustains through these 4 days, and then through Sukkos, and through the whole Yom Tov, and then through the year. By all means, that yes. But not start calculations of why this happened, that happened, and what could happen. That's not how a Torah Yid, a Chassidus Yid thinks. Okay. Why do we sound the shofar at the end of Yom Kippur? So since we're coming from Yom Kippur, we're literally less than 24 hours But actually it's 24 hours since Yom Kippur ended. Amish just coming from it literally. So we'll talk about a few things, so, as I said, post Yom Kippur that are still with us. So generally speaking, in Sfarim it talks about different reasons, in Bali Halacha, in Lubavitch, in the Smag, in the different Sfarim that talk about. Generally speaking, some talk about that the shofar is because that's when Yom Kippur announced the Yovel, the time of the Beis HaMikdash, that all the slaves were freed. So even though we don't have that today, but it's still symbolic of that. Others talk about being the victory of Yom Kippur. So we celebrate it through a shofar. Others remind us of Matan Torah, Ol Elokim B'Trua, that Matan Torah was with a shofar, and the same thing Yom Kippur is a return and a connection, the Siyum of Matan Torah, Luchas Shnias, the second tablets. And finally, that it renounces the Yom Tov. It's good Yom Tov, we finished the day, we're successful in our prayers. Which explains also why we sing the victory song afterwards, Napoleon's March. And finally, there's the explanation of this, reminding us of the shofar gadol. V'hoye b'yemahu yitakum shofar gadol. The Moshiach comes, there'll be the sounding of the great shofar. The great shofar is a shofar that will gather. Uba evdim eretz Ashur nedochem eretz Mitzrayim l'shtachvis al har kodesh. Boiv l'shtachvis al har kodesh. So it's essentially a call of the shofar that will come Mashiach's times. And Yom Kippur is me'ein la'asad lov, me'ein elam haba. This is says in a number of places. One place it says it, which I'll actually quote it shortly, is in Ayin Beis, Chele Gimel, page Aleph Shin Chav Hey, and on, where he talks about the shofar gadol connected to Yom Kippur. So it's like a wake-up call, the ultimate wake-up call. And that's what that one kiyah that we may do at the end of Yom Kippur. So in Asa, following up to that, what's the difference between a regular shofar and the great shofar that will be sounded when Moshiach comes? So it's actually a maimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe in Sefer Mamorim Yiddish, where he talks about where it says shofar stam in one novi, and then shofar gadol in this nevuah in Yeshaya. Actually, in the year after the 6-day war, Simchas Torah, the second Fabring, Shabbos Bereshit that year, it was the same kvias like this year. Simchas Torah was Friday, so there was the second Fabring on Shabbos. The second Fabring, and the Rebbe spoke about that Maimon and said it was a nevuah, a prophecy. He spoke about it again, Yutes Kislev that year, Tovshin Chov Ches. We're talking now. It was still 1967, but it was Tovshin Chov Ches already, the new year. And he spoke there in the Maimer, he talks about the difference between shofar stam and shofar gadol. You can look it up there in detail. Yom Kippur is a me'ein, a taste of shofar gadol. In Samach Vav he talks about how it's a me'ein of Ilam Haba in Be'achil v'shtiya. That's why we don't eat or drink on Yom Kippur. So it's the tainug atzmi. It's a tainug murgish, a tainug bilti murgish. A tainug murgish is a tainug that you feel in a sense which can come through a meal, like Shabbos. But Yom Kippur, even when it's Shabbos, Yom Kippur is even higher. Me'ein, a taste, no pun intended, but a sampling of the experience of Im Be'achil v'shtiya. Okay. So let's moving on with the post-Yom Kippur questions. Is there a connection between the call of the great shofar and Yom Kippur's impact on all Jews to do teshuva? This takes us to Ayin Beis. This must have been a question from one of the people that is a participant in the Ayin Beis share I give every day. Shalom Avracha, Rabbi Jacobson. I have a question about the teshuva related to the third type of sweetening of the gvuras described by the Rebbe Rashab in volume 3 of Ayin Beis, pages 1325 to 1328. So there he talks about 3 ways of sweetening gvura. One is through chesed. The chesed simply is a lot more sweetness, so-called overrides the bitterness of gvura. The second is that it transforms the bitterness of gvura, but it's still coming from chesed. And the third, that the gvura itself, from the very darkness of gvura, the distress, even in the darkest moments, leads that it's itself, gvuras nimtakim b'msharsham, the highest level of transformation. That's what he talks. So the Rebbe Rashab explains there that the higher power causing the teshuva of Kal Shebekalim on Yom Kippur, meaning every Jew, no matter who, on Yom Kippur, especially by Ne'ilah, is the shofar gadol. That's what he calls it. The shofar gadol reaches the cry to even the Evdim Beretz Asher, as he explains. Evdim means they're lost, completely lost. Not just oppressed, not just downtrodden, like Nedochim Beretz Mitzrayim, Evdim. But they too are reached by the shofar gadol of Yom Kippur. How does this relate to the idea that on Yom Kippur there's a revelation of Yechidah that brings a Yid to do teshuva on Yom Kippur? So we know there's the concept of Yechidah that every neshama has. Especially the last part of Yom Kippur, Ne'ilah, Keneged Yechidah. Now, but simply speaking, without looking into Ayin Beis, you would say, okay, that's the point. The shofar gadol has the quality to pierce even someone who's completely lost, Evdim, and reach that spark called Yechidah within them. However, in Ayin Beis, he says something interesting. He says, Gvuras nimtakim b'sharsham, the Gvuras themselves. He says it's not coming from the Nefesh Elokis. In addition to the general question above, the Rebbe Rashab says the teshuva he's speaking about is not at all from the Nefesh Elokis, and Yechidah is usually described as the essence of the Nefesh Elokis. Because the Nefesh Elokis means, the Nefesh Elokis as a divine soul, obviously senses Elokus. So Yom Kippur, it becomes intensified. There he explains as the Nefesh Habamis in its utter distress, that it itself comes to like hit rock bottom and recognize how lost it is. And that's what happens, which would seem to suggest it's not the Yechidah. So even if Yechidah is not the shofar gadol, it still seems unclear how the influence of Yechidah on Yom Kippur relates to the shofar gadol influence described in Ayin Beis. I look forward to any insights you may have on the above questions. So this is just yesh lema b'derech hefsher, as we say, possibly. He may not be talking about Yechidah. It's a separate thing. There's one thing that Yom Kippur is radiating the Yechidah shebenefesh in every Jew, and that's why even a Kal Shebekalim has a nefesh alikis. Like I said, neshama shenasata b'tahirihi Yechidah, ava misuteres, as he explains in Tanya. So even a Kal Shebekalim, when he's challenged, and especially in Yom Kippur, and a day when it's more revealed. So there's an awakening from that part. But there's an additional thing that he's saying in Ayin Beis. That would be more a shtickle, you could say, Malmaila Lamata in the Malmata Lamaila of Yom Kippur. Because it's coming sof kol sof from the Nefesh Elokis, which is already naturally divine. It's just concealed most of the time, most of the year. So in a way, it's more Malmaila. Malmata Lamaila Mamish, it comes from the Gvuras themselves. I'm talking Gvuras from the Gvuras themselves, that's the Nefesh Habamis. But since it hit a point of such distress, the Nefesh Habamis sees how far it's fallen. That's what causes it to wake up. That's the shofar gadol. So that would be the most basic way to explain it. So it's not a contradiction, it's two separate things, and you don't have to necessarily link them together. One is Taka Yechidah of the Nefesh Elokis, and the other is the Nefesh Habamis through its dark distress. That's how I would explain it. And that's why the Nefesh Habamis' distress reaches the Helam Ha'atzmi. The Nefesh Elokis reaches more the Gilui Ha'atzmi, because it's a Gilui, it's a Likus. Like later he'll talk about how Torah is the Oiz V'Teshia, Oiz Le Nefesh Elokis, it gives Nefesh Elokis strength to reach the highest levels, even Yechidah, I'm adding that. And then Teshia, Mateshes, it weakens the Nefesh Habamis. But that's through Torah. Here we're talking about a distress that comes from the darkness of the Nefesh Habamis itself. That's the most basic way to explain it. Moving on. Okay. Why do we sing Napoleon's March at the end of Yom Kippur and not at the beginning? Like the Rebbe brings a number of places that there was a custom that before they went to war, they would sing a victory song with the confidence that for sure they'll win. So why do we sing it at the end? So it's two separate things. There's a song that comes before, but there's another song that comes after the victory. You've davened all day, 5 tefillas, finished Ne'ilah, on the highest point. I spoke about shofar gadol, the shofar, and Lashon Haba B'Yerushalayim. So all of that is within that you sing the victory song that we have definitely been victorious, like the Dedan Notzach. That's the whole point of it. Now we're singing at the end of Yom Kippur, like we blow shofar at the end, and then we say Lashon Haba B'Yerushalayim, L'ased Laveh. Like I said, Ein Elam Haba. The Yom Kippur is like Elam Haba, the shofar gadol of Elam Haba. Ein B'Achila V'Shtiyah of Elam Haba. Okay, so then someone asked a question, a different question. Why Napoleon's March when the Alter Rebbe was so opposed to him? Napoleon was like Shlosh Klippos Atmeis. The Alter Rebbe speaks about him, why he opposed, writes a letter, and the Mittler Rebbe writes a longer letter explaining why he was so opposed to Napoleon, and Alexander would be harder for Jews begashmis, but Napoleon was a kafir, godless. It may have been freedom, physically easier for Yidden, but spiritually much harder. So that's exactly the point, is the ishapche. We're not talking about Napoleon victorious, God forbid. That we're taking his niggin, that he sang and played and used for his victory of mamish the opposite, and transforming it. You talk about Vudas and talking b'sharsham. That's the ultimate, taking Napoleon himself and transforming it. In Vayeshev Tavshin and Beis, the Sicha, the Rebbe speaks that today we can go into France and transform it. There was a time where France could not win the war. It was be not good. Now we can go and transform it. Alter Rebbe began by with the Napoleon's March niggin, and that became a song of victory that we sing every Yom Kippur. That's the brief answer. Why is Yom Kippur exclusively a day of repentance when a person should be repenting every day? It says, Kol Yom B'Teshuva. All your days should be tshuva. There's another way someone wrote it. As Yom Kippur, a last-ditch effort at repentance, shouldn't a person be repenting every day? To what extent? Okay. So the answer is, like everything. There's a mini Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and even Sukkos every day of the year. Remember, these are Yom Tovim Klolim. That's why Tishrei is Eishis Reishis, like the head. Because like a head encompasses all the limbs of the body, Tishrei encompasses all the days of the year. So from Rosh Hashanah is the Hamshach of Malchus into all the days of the year. From Yom Kippur is the Hamshach of Tshuva in all the days of the year. And Sukkah is the Hamshach of Simcha in all the days of the year. So Ivdu Sashem B'Simcha, for example, is also every moment. And Kabbalas Malchus, every day we say Kabbalas Malchus. Say Moidani Lefanecha, Moidim, Hoidu, Kabbalas El Malchus Shamayim. In every mitzvah we say Asher Kedushan Mitzvahs V'Tzivanu. So every day has, and where are they getting each of these? But on a smaller scale and more like a daily scale, microcosm. Where does it get the koyach? It gets from Rosh Hashanah. From Yom Kippur, it gets the power of tshuva for all days of the year. We like unpack it throughout the year. That's the answer to that question. So then, to what extent can Yom Kippur help a person who hasn't repented all year? The answer is exactly that. So Yom Tshuva Lakel. Yom Kippur being that is like the ultimate tshuva day. So even if a person hasn't done tshuva every day properly, Yom Kippur has the day to fill in for it. And it's Shumash Yom Chaper. The very day itself, Achaz B'Shana, is only once a year that you have such a power. But it's not a contradiction. If someone will say, and if something happens, God forbid, a little later, so you always have power to do tshuva any moment in your life. And in a way, you could say that tshuva that you're doing is coming from the power of Yom Kippur of that year. Similar to what the Arizal says about Aseret Yemei Tshuva, that we get that from Sunday, Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 7 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur cover the entire cycle of the week. So from Sunday of Aseret Yemei Tshuva, we get the power of Tshuva throughout every Sunday in the year. From Monday, every Monday, Tuesday. And the Rebbe explains that it's both, it's also a tikkun, rather, I should say, for every Sunday of the previous year. And the Rebbe adds, Yashleimer, it's also a preparation for every Sunday of the coming year. And every Monday, Tuesday, and so on. So Yom Kippur, for sure, that would be the case. Shabbos, Shabbosin, that's just, the Yom Kippur is the root of tshuva throughout the entire year. And finally, one more question. Why did God send Jonah to a non-Jewish city and encourage them to repent? Why didn't he send them first to Jewish cities first? Is there a lesson here that we have to help others first before helping ourselves? So, B'chlal, yes, the story of Nineveh, of course, is the story of teshuva. That Hashem sent Jonah to get Nineveh to do teshuva. But in a way, the ultimate lesson, even for Yidden, is to show that even non-Jews can do teshuva. So how much more so you? It's number one. Number two, like you said, it shows us the responsibility is not just for the Jewish people, for the whole world. It's about transforming the entire world. And you see it also in the story, on the boat. He was with other non-Jews. And they were all people, they actually woke up. Jonah, he was asleep, physically asleep and spiritually asleep. They woke him up to teshuva. And to the point that they said someone must have done something wrong here. Until Jonah says, it's me. Yedeyani. I know, Shalami, that it's due to me that this Saira HaGodl Hazeh Aleim. Hazeh Aleim. Saira HaGodl Hazeh Aleim. That this great storm is upon you because of me. Throw me over the boat and the storm will stop. So it's about responsibility, and you see a non-Jew is awakening a Jew. It brings to mind also what the Gemara says about Menei Be Abba Lishde Be Narge, why the greatest prophecy about Moshiach is in Sefer Avadya. Avadya was a ger from Meyav. So the Gemara asks, why did he say the greatest prophecy about V'hoisel Hashem Amlucha, even greater than Yeshaya and Yecheskel and Yirmiyahu? It says, because Menei Be Abba Lishde Be Narge. You want to cut down a tree, you need the wood from the tree to be the handle of the axe. He came from Meyav, from the children of light. Meyav, same thing with David. His grandmother was Rus. Because you want to transform the world, it has to come from the world, from Eden. And therefore he prophesizes about Eden. I mentioned Meyav because it's connected, but the bottom line is it's a transformation of the world. So in a way you could say, so the teshuva of Yom Kippur tells us about how broad the teshuva is. It affects the entire world, and that teaches us the lesson. And Jonah learned from these people on the boat, of all the people. So now, being that this is also leading us into Sukkos, so it's a special Sukkos program, let's talk about Sukkos now. As you can see from this, questions keep coming in. Thank God, and I want to thank you for that. It's a good opportunity. Go to chassidusapply.com where you can find this and all previous programs, as well as a forum where you could ask all your questions completely anonymously. And I encourage you to do so. And the mitzvah Hashem, please God, I'll try to answer them. So now, how can Sukkot help us in this time of war in Israel? What is the essential message of Sukkot? Which will answer that initial question. So Sukkot has many messages, obviously, many lessons, but two key primary ones, especially relevant to our time, is number one, trust in God. Why do we sit in a sukkah? Why do we go out of our secure, protected from the elements, homes, and teshuva came to do it and live in a sukkah for 7-8 days? To remind us that we trust in God, that it's not our physical homes and our rooftops and our shelters that protect us, it's God. And that's why indeed Sukkah was the two reasons. Sukkah is because they actually sat in Sukkahs when they left Mitzrayim, Sukkahs Eshafti, or Sukkahs reminds of the Anani HaKavod, the clouds of glory that protected them. So Sukkah is a statement of trust. How more appropriate than today? That of course we need to do everything we need to do militarily and spiritually in every possible way, protect ourselves and fight our enemies. But we have to also, Sukkot also remembers that even when we're vulnerable, physically, God protects us. And we've seen miracles in Eretz Yisrael, literally. Second point is the Daled Minim. It's the second mitzvah. What is the Daled Minim? So it has many different symbolism. One of them is that they're actually spiritual weapons. That's what it says in Vayikra Rabbah. That the 4 minim are like spiritual weapons. And they're shaped like them. Sword, like a grenade. And the same with all the species. And the Da Notzach, Anon Notzachaya, that's why we go with the Lulav and Esrog and we direct them, the Nanuyim. We shake them and we direct them in all different directions. North and south and east and west. And from all directions. To show that we are victorious over the entire world no matter what comes our way. And these are spiritual weapons. Again, we need to have our physical weapons. Because we live in a world where Hashem wants us to do whatever we can to do naturally, as Yaakov prepared for war. And unfortunately, sometimes you need to do that. But it goes hand in hand with the protection of the Sukkah and God. And the protection of the spiritual weapons of the Daled Minim. How does the Sukkah help us internalize the light of Yom Kippur? So we know what it says, Bekesa tika b'chedesh shefer, Bekesa liyem chagenu. So it says Rosh Hashanah is still Bekesa, it's concealed. And same as Yom Kippur, which is called Rosh Hashanah at times. Liyem chagenu, it's revealed Sukkos. So simply put, the first half of the month is called Yom Neroyim. Neroyim, Neire v'oyim. Gevura. Smoil. Smoili tachas l'reishi, the Zohar says. Why? Because that day is of more of awe, of reverence, of respect. You're standing before the king with a humility. Inside, you're celebrating. V'gilu barada. You're celebrating, but you don't start making somersaults and dancing in front of the king. You stand with humility, you're crowning God as king, you're accepting his authority. You're asking for forgiveness. God forgives. Salachti kidvarecha. Everything done with humility, especially after what happened by Matan Torah with all the noise and fanfare. Moshe Rabbeinu comes down quietly with the second luchas. But then, when you leave that palace of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, second half of the month, from the 15th, the full moon, Yemini techapkeni, says the Zohar. Now it's Yemin that embraces us. And how does that? And now we celebrate. Now you start dancing. So Sukkos is essentially the revelation of the Simcha of Yom Kippur. That's why it says that the sechach of the Sukkah comes from the Anani Hakteris, from the clouds, from the so-called vapor of the Kteris, of the incense of Yom Kippur. To the point that when you get, as that Simcha grows each day of Sukkos, and we come all the way to Simchas, it says Simchas Torah, the Rabbeim say, that which you accomplish on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur through tears, you accomplish Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah through joy. It's not just two things. That's the revelation of Hazerim Bedima, Berini Yektzeru. First you sow with tears, and that comes into a great joy and a simcha. So Sukkot is the celebration of everything we've accomplished Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So it's essentially taking the light of Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and internalizing it. First in a Sukkah, which is a makif, but then lekachtem lachem, pnimiuschem, Yom Harishon, the Daled Minim, and Chassidus explains, brings it into a pnimius. Chassidus, in Yiddishkeit, everything makif, pnimi. Talis, tzitzis. Asher kedushan mitzvah v'tzivonu, and then says, which by al-hadlik ner Shabbos Kedush, or whatever the specific mitzvah is. Okay. What is the difference between the mitzvah of Sukkah and the four species? So I just answered that. Makif and Pnimi. We start at night with the mitzvah of Sukkos. So first we surround ourselves completely, like with our Nani Yaakov, the protection of Hashem, in a Makif dik way. But we're completely encompassed by it. Then comes the next morning, Lekachta Lachem B'Yom Harishon, and we internalize it through the Daled Minim. There are many more explanations, obviously, but that one is in context. Are the four species spiritual weapons? So the answer is yes, as I mentioned from the Medrash and Vayikra Rabbah. And someone asked the question: how do we explain the Arba Minim and how each of them represents a different type of Jew? Thanks. The answer is, in addition to spiritual weapons, we also find that Rebbe brings us often that the Esrig, the Lulav, the Dasim, and the Arovis represent 4 different types of Yid. The Esrig, which has Tam V'Reach, both taste and smell, represents a Yid that has both Torah and mitzvahs. Torah is taste, more pnimius. Teiroscha b'seich me'ai. We learn it, and mitzvahs is more makif reach, which is more of an aroma. A lulav, which is Torah, which has taste, but no smell, that is a lulav, Torah, someone who has Torah, and not so much mitzvahs. Hadasim is the opposite, has a smell and no taste. So that's mitzvahs and not Torah. And finally, the Arova has neither taste or smell. And that's the simple Jew, the Jew that has neither of the two. And therefore, both Torah and not mitzvahs. Now, obviously, everyone has something, but we're talking about primarily. And then you bind them all together by Aguda Achas to show that Atem Nitzov Mayem Kulchem L'fnei Hashem, from the great leaders all the way to the water carriers and the wood choppers. Everyone stands together. That's what the binding of them comes together. Which that unity is obviously connected to successful wars. You want to be successful in victory, you need to have unity. Unity is the key to all brachas. And that's the connection between the 4 species as being spiritual weapons and 4 species as being corresponding to the 4 types of Yid, Jews. How can we maximize the blessings of the Sukkah, being that is the only mitzvah that encompasses our entire bodies? To read it more specifically, if a sukkah is the only mitzvah that our entire bodies are surrounded by the mitzvah, how can we take advantage of the time we are in the sukkah to maximize the potential for asking for real brachas from Hashem? So, the mere fact that we're coming from Yom Kippur, it says, "L'kachtem l'cham b'yem harishon, rishon l'cheshbon avenos," because it's a clean slate. And we have the 4 days between Yom Kippur and Sukkah busy with mitzvahs. And then we're surrounded entirely in a Sukkah. And we have the Dal Minim, the spiritual weapons. So it tells you right there that we have unbelievable resources available to us, in addition to all the other resources that we have. So this is a perfect, the most opportune time to ask for all the brachas. And how do we do that? I mentioned Shalom, Avis Yisrael and Achdus Yisrael. Ruyin kol Yisrael leishu b'sukkah achas. The Jews are worthy of all in one sukkah, the unity. That's what the sukkah represents, the unity of all 4 types of Yidden sitting in the same sukkah, the unity that is symbolized in the 4 species, and all that has become powerful spiritual weapons to overcome any challenge, both within, without, spiritual, physical. So this is what we need to do. The Achdus and Avis Yisrael that we demonstrate through Achnos Esorchim, having guests, through in general showing generosity and kindness and gratitude and so on. That's how we maximize the blessings. By behaving. Remember, there's doing the mitzvahs, but you don't want to just do it mechanically. Mitzvahs anoshim alamada. By behaving accordingly, by living up to what the message of the sukkah is. Because you could sit in the sukkah, God forbid, and also, God forbid, argue with people. But to sit in the sukkah and live up to the sukkah's message and the sukkah's embrace and hug, and the same with the Dal Minim, the 4 species, that, when you behave that way, that's what brings all the brachas. And that's how we maximize it. That's why it's taka mitzvah net of sukkahs to add additional tzedakah, as it says in Siddur from the Alter Rebbe. One more piece about the spiritual weapons, somebody wrote the following. We know that there's even a story that during Sukkot in the Beis HaMikdash, there was a time when a group of tzedukim, the tzedukim who believed only in Torah Shebiksav and not Torah Sheba'al, took over and installed their own Kohen Gadol, who was making a mockery of the service, and the people were offended, and pelted the man with their estragim until he got off the stage. Hopefully we never have to get physical, but how can we use the lulav of an esrog as a spiritual weapon to draw down beautiful blessings and to ward off and scare away our enemies? So obviously that was physically with the esragim. Now, for the slegim which serve like missiles or bombs, I wouldn't say we should use them. It's a mitzvah. But remember, the key thing to remember is that slegim are spiritual weapons. The same with the other three species. And spiritual weapons is that they are the root of all weapons. That when you can unleash their power, they will ward off any enemy and prevent anything from happening. That's what we hope. Now, if that doesn't happen for any reason, we also are prepared militarily. So I think we have to look at it more in a spiritual context. Okay. Now comes a sad question. If the sechach represents the clouds of glory that protected us in the wilderness, why didn't it provide protection on October 7th? Which of course came, Shmini had said, Simchas Beis HaShoeivah, after 7 days of sitting in a sukkah. Yes, we know that wearing a helmet will protect someone from a coconut falling out of a tree on their head, but the same helmet won't protect against an asteroid. But where in Torah does it say Hashem or the clouds of glory only protect us against minor inconveniences, and are not there to protect us from bigger, more serious things? So you have a very good question, and we all have the similar question. Not frankly only on Sukkos. It says Hashem lo yona v'lo yishin Hashem Yisrael, especially in Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Asher Eini Hashem Elokecha b'Mereishis Hashana v'ad Achri Shana. God's providence is there from the beginning of the year and the end to the end of the year. That pasuk actually refers to Rosh Hashanah. So where was God protecting the 1,200 Rahman al-Islam Korbanos that was so massacred on October 7th? And my answer is I have no answer. We'll soon talk about the 10 martyrs, but it's a similar thing. We don't have an answer. It doesn't take away from all those promises and blessings, and we continue to hold on to them, because look at how many miracles have happened. That doesn't dismiss this, don't get me wrong. Even if one person dies, is a tragedy. But you cannot ignore the miracles that have happened. Look at the missiles coming in from Iran. And look at 3,000 years, 4,000 years of our history. So something has been working to protect us. However, it's not enough. We still want the Geula. The Golos is still here. And as I said, even one casualty is more than tolerable. And that's the only way to really approach it. So the approach is, what are we going to do about it? We strengthen our commitment, we strengthen our love, we strengthen joining together, we use the spiritual weapons, and we do what we have to do. Yes, so like as you said, we can use the lulav and esser as spiritual weapons to draw down beautiful blessings and to ward off and scare away our enemies. Why was pouring water during Simchas Beis HaShoeivah considered such a joyous event? So Chassidus explains that wine naturally causes simcha. Nichnas yain yotze seid. Yain levav yismach. When a person drinks wine, yain levav enish yismach. It causes the person to be joyous, naturally. Water does not cause you to be naturally joyous. You're only doing it because it's a mitzvah from Hashem. So it's considered to be a simcha and tainug poshet. Like we spoke before about Elam Haba, it's not defined by anything. It's simply because we're celebrating God's mitzvah. The drawing of water that was used on the Beis Beach, and they danced all night. How did the Rebbe ask us to recreate this celebration? So the Rebbe in Tavshim Mem Aleph, Shnas Hakel, I remember it vividly. The Rebbe then asked, let's celebrate Simchas. He was talking about Simchas Beis HaShoeivah over all the years. But especially that year, he said to dance in the streets. We created today and do so in the greatest way. So, Kalkalosan Zui Takanosan, then the Simcha began the second night of Sukkot, because there was a chol, there was a flute, there were instruments used. Now we begin the first night. And even though it's not the mitzvah as it was in time of the Beis HaMikdash, but it's like a zeichri to it. And we do it with a full passion. And indeed has transformed thousands and thousands of lives, this simcha. And the unity that comes along with it. Okay. And then a practical application of that, as Sukkot comes, it's exactly what we should do. celebrate, and in the streets, because as we were speaking before, it's about transforming the world, not just ourselves. So we do it in the streets, like the Nanuyim in all directions. The Shivim Parim, the 70 cows, the 70 bulls that were brought during Sukkos, corresponding to the 70 nations of the world. Rosh Hashanah, we said, Al Medinas Be'yomer, that we affect the destiny of nations. So we dance in the streets to bring that simcha into the streets, as it will be La'asad Lave, when the dancing will take place in the streets, and the entire world will be serving and connecting to God. So now there's a few more questions I want to address with the limited time regarding the war in Israel. And I'll be brief just to cover a few key points. What more can we do? Meaning, in addition to all the prayers that we have, what more can we do? We still see hostages are being held. The war continues to go on. So obviously, there's always Ma'alim B'Kei, there's always more you can do. More prayers, more Tehillim, more Avos Yisrael, more mitzvahs, especially the mitzvahs that have the quality that connects to protection and driving fear in the enemies. But someone wrote an interesting thing which I'd like to read. I was at the oil yesterday, he writes, and I realized that over the past years, tens of thousands of people have davened there, and I'm sure many have asked for the hostages to be safely rescued, but we haven't heard complete good news yet, as 100 people are still missing. So I tried something different. I know how much the Rebbe loved and cared about his mother. In my kfittel, in my note, I wrote in the merit of the Mesiras Nefesh the Rebbe's mother had in Almaty, Kazakhstan. To help her husband teach Torah and spread Yiddishkeit, may Hashem answer our prayers positively and rescue all the hostages, and then I gave extra tzedakah to make a keli for the brachas. But today I feel maybe I was disrespectful because I brought the Rebbe's family into the matter. Or perhaps maybe it's okay that I wrote because this is a time of danger and all cards are on the table. Even if it turns out that I was disrespectful and wrong, I'll accept whatever repercussions there are, as long as my prayers actually work and we hear complete good news and everyone is rescued and safe and peace is restored. If I owe the Rebbe an apology for being disrespectful, I will surely apologize the next time I am there. What are your thoughts? No, absolutely did the right thing. You don't an apology at all. I can say with pretty much confidence that the Rebbe would thank you actually, and his mother would thank you. A mother like Rachel, Mavakal Boneha, she cries for her children, so to ask her to have Rachmanis, and to ask the Rebbe, the name of his mother, to have Rachmanis, and that Hashem should have Rachmanis, I think very appropriate, and I actually commend you, because not only did you do something, but you also were creative, you were original. You did something that maybe others didn't think of. I mean creative and original in a negative way, I mean it in a positive way, because that's exactly what we need to be doing in times like this, to do whatever is possible. And we know the Rebbe, when people said, you bothered me, you shouldn't have done this, was never to ask a Rebbe, and ask the Rebbe, and especially in the name of his mother, to help Yidden, is like a schus. So I see that not as disrespectful at all, and quite the contrary. And I want to conclude, since it's also going to be the last program we do before the end of the holiday, I want to say this. Someone wrote like this: what was the Poalei Tzedek group in the town of Lubavitch who woke up early every morning to say Tehillim and learn Torah together? And should we recreate that today? To bring merit into the world and help save the remaining hostages and to bring Moshiach. So the answer is yes. Let me tell you the story. I think it's very relevant and very helpful and very timely. So in the sechach of the first night of Sukkot, Tov Shin Hei, it's printed in Sefer HaSichos as Tov Shin Hei, 5705, 1944, that would be. The middle of World War II, actually. Friedrich Rebbe tells us that the year Simchas Torah, Tov Reish Mem Ches, which corresponds to the year 1887. So the Rebbe Rashab said a mimer then, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu bo betrunya im briesov. That the Eibusher never comes with complaints over his creations. He'll never give them something, a burden they cannot deal with. And he spoke there very greatly, strongly, about the Maila of simple Jews. The mimer was such a seder, such an awakening, that after the mimer, there was a group of people, starting with a Yid called, his name was Moti Yossi David Shleimus. That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe says. That he thumped himself on his chest, and he said, I'm going to set up a brotherhood called Poalei Tzedek. And they will begin saying Tehillim every morning, 3 a.m., and together with that, they did it in a shul called Rabbi Yamin Shtibel, and then they left. As they left home in pairs from the Tehillim that they said, they would review whatever their teacher had taught them shir in learning. This went over for a number of years, I believe 4 or 5 years, till Tofresh Nun Beis. In Tofresh Nun Beis, there was a Sheva Brachas by the Rebbe Rashab's sister, who married Rabbi Hardenstein. And the Rebbe Rashab, in the middle of the wedding, said that those Yidden of Poalei Tzedek, who dedicated every morning to say Tehillim, are extremely tired, simply very special, very precious. And learn Torah are very precious. And there's precious like the Malach Mechol, when he sees Yidden do something and he goes before Hashem and he advocates for them, he said, because of these Yidden. And the Rebbe Rashab said, I want to dance with them. And this Yid, this Moti Yossi, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in the Sikha Tovshin Hey, says and writes, went to dance with the Rebbe Rashab, and those from the Poalei Tzedek that were there danced with the Rebbe Rashab. Continues talking about the Mile of Anoshim Pshutim. There are more details there in the story. So it's a Simchas Torah story, which we're coming to, which is the anniversary of October 7th. It's a story about Tehillim. It's a story about Poalei Tzedek. So I am not at all that I'm going to establish that we have to reestablish it, but the idea of Yidden coming together with their own Sederis to say Tehillim at 3 a.m., whenever people can do it, you see the story from the Rebbe Rashab, unbelievable. So with that, let us conclude and say the schus of the Tehillim that Yidden is saying now, schus of Tehillim that Yidden said then, schus of the Tehillim that we will continue to say, should pierce the heavens. The Eibusher should already have Rachmanis, give us a total victory and elimination of our enemies, free the hostages, and we should march into Anon Etzachaya, the victory with the Daled Minim and the Sukkah, and even before Sukkos comes, we should see this victory with the Geula Amitis Vashlema, and then we can march into Yontif together with the Rebbe, together with all the soldiers, together with all the spiritual soldiers, in a total victory of the Geula Amitis Vashlema. Everyone should have a good gebench to Yar, a freilich and Sukkos, and a freilich and Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Be well and be blessed. This has been MyLife Chassidus Applied. We're here every Sunday, 8 to 9 p.m. Next week, because of Chol Hamoed, we won't have a program, but we will resume. Following that, keep you posted, the exact schedules. Again, a good gebench Yar and a good Yontif.
This program is brought to you by MyLife Chassidus Applied. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at chassidusapply.com/donate.